Понеслась, по-моему. Так, oh yeah. Oh, finally. Do you hear me? Так, надо выключить саунд. Check, check, check. Okay, excuse me for a long delay. I don't have so much experience with YouTube, and somehow my streaming system was working not properly, and now I'm somehow logged in. So I have, for that reason, to set up a bit the... Можешь камеру повернуть? Чуть-чуть меня. To set up a bit the OBS, because OBS somehow resetted. But now we can start. So my name is Stanislav Glazov, and I'm musician and media artist and educator based in Berlin. And since almost 1 year I'm intensively using Bitwig, and today I'm really happy to speak about the integration of Bitwig and TouchDesigner, and I try to bring here different people who are from the Bitwig scene and who are from TouchDesigner scene, so it will be very interesting to see who is here. And is still there some feedback? So basically it should not be. I will check with headers. And okay, now I have to bring my concentration back, because I was fighting for 23 minutes with the strange situation on technical side. Anyway, I want to show you my small program which I wrote for myself and for you. What I'm going to speak about today. So basically I want to show both TouchDesigner and Bitwig. I also got some quite interesting ideas of usage, of common usage of both programs. And first thing I want to tell is, okay, I also need to make a screen capture. Okay, I will make a scene. Best. And I will add the window capture, add source, window, no, it should be like a screen capture actually. Screen capture, and screen 1. So do you see my screen? So I need to open the window. Okay, screen is visible, that's cool. And now we can start. So first topic, and why I'm actually called the program of today stream Modulate and Conquer, is because I need to tell some story before. I was long time user, the Ableton user, and then I was started to make music on synthesizers. And on some moment, after some long experience doing music, I realized that most important thing to make the music alive is to be able to make a flexible modulation. And what is a problem of Ableton from my point of view, that it's very lack of modulation. So actually we can only modulate LFO there, modulate filter with LFO there. That's all. Everything else, in order to make something more interesting, you need to use max MSP, max for life, and that's kill your CPU. So basically it's almost not usable. So I was switched completely to making music on the analog modular synthesizers. Slowly I developed my studio, and now I'm fairly to say almost on stage. I don't need so much synths anymore because I have Bitwig, and because I can modulate anything I want, and Bitwig has also super fantastic sound quality, so it's more than enough for making everything you can imagine. And also, if we turn back a bit from the artistic, from the technical side to artistic side, and how you can achieve the interesting result in your art. So it's more philosophical question, but from my 18 years of experience, I can say this is most important question, because if you understand how to make your art catching attention from the people, then you can really enjoy the connection to your crowd, to your audience, and to express what you think and develop. So basically, I will make a small version of myself, something like that, and open the screen capture so I can draw something. Okay, and for me, especially after working long time with generative art, on some moment I realized that just generative is not enough. So basically, in order to achieve people attention, to touch their heart, you need to have some kind of dramaturgy. So it should be dramatic. It should have some development. But anyway, the truth is in between. So basically, in between something what we can call screenplay, or like rules of Stanislavski, with conflict and two playing lines and some development of story. We need also to feel the place with something what is changing, and for that we need the modulation. So what is actually modulation? If we compare our life, we can find a lot of changing cycles. Like every day we have sun going up and going down, up and down, and that is kind of LFO. That is precisely the trajectory of trajectory of Earth around the sun, or rotation of Earth in that case. Then we have another modulation, which is like summer and winter, and that modulation modulate the basic modulation, the date cycle. So if I draw it with red line, in some moment we can achieve something what is called in music amplitude modulation. So we have date cycle which is constantly changing for, sorry, that should be not amplitude modulation, that should be frequency modulation. So we have also a second line which is changing the density of day and night phase. So that's all our life exists from cycles, and that cycles are kind of modulation. But also we have some additional factors which change our life, like I don't know, weather. Someday weather is good, someday weather is bad. Someday we have sun, someday we have rain, like today in Berlin, and that's factors could not be really predicted. Or sometimes we have moon closing the lights of sun. So that's all factors we can also imagine as a modulations. And also basically the story of a life of some person has kind of some modulation as well. So person has birthday, then it starts to grow, then in some moment it achieve adult elder, and then he can make decisions, and because of decision we can develop on completely different trajectory. Like if you choose for imaginary stability, you go to the office and then you have the endless Romanian techno track in your life. Like nothing is changing. You have day, home, office, home, office, home, office, home, office. And if you choose something else, like to be an artist, you have something like this. So that's kind of decisions you can make, and that decision change the screenplay of your life and bring completely different results, more or less house, more or less regularity. So that's all we can reproduce somehow, or that's paradigm we can reproduce in our creative work. So for that we need basically to understand several rules to how to create art in between generative, which is actually functions, and screenplay, which are actually the decisions. And if you go only for screenplay, then you have too much of handwork, which is not always possible. If you go for generative approach, then you have too much of similarity. Even you still have all these modulations, but you need something which change the thing dramatically. So that's kind of my basic idea of what I want to speak about. Okay, that was a bit too theoretical. That topic I think I will cover additionally. So now I want to slowly turn to speak about the Bitwig. Like I posted in my stories, really last week I was in this TD Bitwig event in Berlin, and I met finally the people who creating it, and I cannot, it's like a bit like Derivative 10 years ago. Small company, actually Derivative is still a small company also, so that's why I'm a fan of both of them. Like Derivative and Bitwig are small companies which are really react on people wishes and try to do their best to develop the technology, to develop the art scene. And if you compare it to like to big corporation monsters which doesn't care about users, it's a big difference. That's why I always I was always happy to pay them money for their work, because they support me, I support them. Okay, now why I choose Bitwig and don't use Ableton anymore. So after 17 years of using Ableton, since 2004 I think I started first time, it was I think Ableton of 4th version, and through long time using modular scenes, I still needed to mix my tracks. Yeah, so I was using the Ableton for recording, and I was mixing them in Ableton, all my hardware tracks. And the quality of mix was for me always a big question, because you need to have a lot of plugins which can solve the technical problems inside of Ableton. For example, I was using some dynamic equalizers where you can dynamically reacting on the volume of a particular frequency ranges solve the problematic places in the mix. And in some moment I realized that Bitwig can open directly the Ableton projects, and it actually do it quite well. So on the end, I realized that I just can open the ready tracks and work on them. And that was a very, very nice transition, because if you already have your working pipeline, it's kind of complicated to change it, and you need to learn physically new properties of uh, of your new program, of a new instrument. And it's always, if you have a running production, it's not possible typically. And after I seen Bitwig, I realized that it's super similar. It's quite similar to Ableton, so you even can use the same hotkeys. But for that, you have the flexibility of TouchDesigner with user simplicity of Resolume, if I would tell it for the visual guys. Uh, Even I would say, yeah, it's just drag and drop, so you don't need to program anything like in TouchDesigner. So basically, it's even much easier than Touch. So I think for some of visual artists or audiovisual artists who already using Touch, it will be not a big deal to understand the logic. And also for the Bitwig users who are a bit into polygrids, it will be also more or less understandable what is going inside of TouchDesigner. So where it's all came from, basically it came from the world of hardware. So if so for example, right now I have on my table the video mixer, this this thing, which is just have several inputs, several outputs, and I can switch them. So basically that was a prototype of idea of any node-based environment. So it was born more or less in visual environment. So basically the first two programs using the node-based approach were pure data, several old school video compositing software on the Silicon Graphics platform, and they all came to idea that it's much more understandable to make the complex task like a diagrams. So you have different devices. For example, if I would have two video players, then I have one video mixer, so I can mix two videos together using different parameters and output the final result somewhere else. That is a basic idea, and that's why we're using also the word procedural as a synonym to the word generative. There is a lot of similarity in these two terms, but also a lot of difference. So basically, both terms are coming from the programmer's background. So procedure is a function in any programming language. And what is function? Function is a lot of operations packed in a black box, which has a public user interface, arguments or parameters, and any procedure can make a predictable result from any input of specified data type, something like that. So generative means a bit different, but basically it's also about the functions. Yeah, so it's also about the black box which generates something, especially if we turning to the modern world and speaking about the generative advertisal networks which generate visual results. It's also like a black box. It has several parameters and returns some results. It's just much more complex. If we're starting to speak about the generative approach, then we have basically two important things to tell. One thing is random. Second thing is logic. Basically, random is what generate random results and make everything interesting and different all the time. And logic is about to, for example, some rules. So if now is daytime, we play more funny music. If it's nighttime, we play more darker music. Something like that. It's a logical relation. And typically all generative tools have more or less possibility to use both of approaches to generate some results. So basically it's about some generation on random basis and about a generation on the rule basis. Okay, that's a bit of theory behind. So let's open Bitwig and start with that. I have to test sound, so I spent today half of day to make all sound work, and then OBS logged into YouTube and resetted all my setup. So hopefully it will work. So I will just open the ready project and test if the sound is coming, and please tell me if it's working. Do you hear the sound from the Bitwig? Cool, amazing. Okay, so first point, if I'm telling now not to Bitwig users but to TouchDesigner users or just artists who never seen Bitwig before or not so much, basically Bitwig is a program using similar idea like Ableton. In sense, from all digital audio workstations I know, or at least for most of them, they either oriented to the live performance or oriented to the studio work to make the arrangements. And why live became so popular from my point of view, that's it was a first program combined both ways and made the seamless integration between the studio work and live performance. So Bitwig is a second program historically, and it happens a lot that second program sometimes is much better than the first one. From my point of view, Bitwig just better in all possible senses. Logically, every program has some problematic points, but for what I need from the digital audio workstation, I don't see yet some dramatical problems until now. So I'm completely happy with it. And maybe we need just to make a very short introduction about the user interface and structure of data, what is inside of Bitwig. So basically, using the tab on keyboard, we can switch between two basic modes, or using these buttons on the left side. On the bottom of the screen, we have arrange, mix, and edit. So basically, that is quite similar to Ableton, but already here we can see the some dramatical improvements. Like in Ableton, you only see the mixer and the matrix of the patterns only in mix mode, and in Bitwig you also can see them in the arrangement mode. Then inside of main user interface we have tracks. So basically, if we draw the structure of data is, and it's important to understand in order to understand how the TD Bitwig is designed. So we have a project. So inside of program we have a project. So also cool to say that Bitwig can have more projects open, but let's stay now for inside of one project. So inside of a project we have the tracks. We can also have the group of tracks, and tracks can have three different types. One type is a MIDI track. Let's paint it blue. One type is blue. Then let's make a red for audio track. And a very big speciality of Bitwig is the mixed track or hybrid track, which can be in the same moment MIDI and audio. So basically there are two types of tracks, and there is also a fourth type of tracks called a fixed track. It's designed similar to how the analog mixing console is designed, because every mixing console has a connection for instruments with some controls of volume, of equalizer, mute, solo buttons, and then also it has the send to external effect and return tracks, or send to integrated effects and return tracks. So basically, if you don't use the effects like reverb on the track itself, which is actually not super good practice for making controllable space of specialization of your sound, you typically use a fixed tracks. So then inside of every track we can have the patterns. So I will draw them somewhere here. That's about the content of the track. If we try to imagine that structure from the background, from our perspective, we can tell like track is a container, but from other side it should be an instrument which can play sound. So it should have some input and it has some output. So doesn't matter which kind of data coming to the input, output is always audio. But input can be either MIDI data or just the audio file. And inside we can have the network of things called devices. That's a kind of, if we try to reproduce it as a node network in TouchDesigner. What is cool that also that devices can be nested, can be integrated, but for now it doesn't matter. And every device logically has some parameters, like a physical device. If we just take any of devices, yeah, we can have we have input channels, we have output channels, and we have some knobs. We can rotate these knobs and control what happens inside. So the same idea is here. And that content of the track, these patterns, are basically like an operator before the track. So that sends data to the device. And depending on the type of the track, this data should be different. So if it's MIDI track, these operators, these patterns should contain MIDI notes. And if this track is audio, it should contain the audio samples. Okay, return to this diagram later if we start to speak about the CD Bitwig. Now I just turn back and let's start to do something and research how it's all designed. So basically we have the track. In order to create a new pattern, we just double click and we become a square with a play button, which is actually this pattern. If we double click it again, it will automatically open the piano roll with the notes, and we can create notes. So for example, I just put I think today is a day of technical fuck-ups, so my Bitwig decided to freeze. Okay, let me restart it. But that don't make a problem, because we still can make some interesting stuff. So I just make a new project, and we can create also the pattern here, so we can see it in both views, in arrangement and mix view. And yeah, let's double click, and I'm going to make some note, half of takt, and play it. So now we can see that nothing happens because the data coming from the MIDI pattern don't connect it to any MIDI device. So we should create some MIDI instrument. And we can already here see that MIDI data is coming into a placeholder, which is not including any instrument for now, but it has a plus button. So basically, if you click here, we will open the Finder, the library view, which will dynamically jump into instruments. and we can select any of instruments. So I will select just polymer and click OK. And now you can see that we have some instruments, so now the sound starting to come out. I make it more silent, and let's speak what happens here and about the interface of the device itself. So basically every Bitwig instrument has some very standardized UI, and it has the content of instrument. Sometimes it has, sometimes not. It has some buttons which can open the nested devices. It's like if you make a box including several physical instruments together and connected before performance. Then on the left side it has 3 buttons, and these buttons are important. One button is to view content of instrument. It's a bit more complex for now, I will tell it later. It has instrument remote controls, and it has modulators. And that's the most important difference of Bitwig to any other DAW, digital audio workstation, because here you can very easily create, using again a plus button, a bunch of instruments which can that is a bit tricky from first point of view. In comparison to the instrument you create on the track, which is automatically connected to the MIDI input, which we don't see, like if we imagine it as a node network, and automatically connected to the output, to the track. If we create a modulator, it doesn't connect it to anything, so it's abstract. So if I will create, let's say, random generator, it's do something, but it don't change anything. In order to connect it, we have this arrow, point with arrow, showing that is output. And in order to set its settings, we need to click on it twice so we can see the control parameters. And here we can see, okay, typically for modulators it's mostly important thing about the synchronization, because all music should be done somehow typically in sync, so it should be synchronized to some events. And in this case, it's synchronized to bar, so that means every bar it generates new value. Then I can make an LFO, for example, like in TouchDesigner you can search here, and this LFO now running without any synchronization to anything, because it's set to Hertz. But still we can synchronize it to the MIDI note, for example. Then every time this note play, it will be resetted. If you follow the animation of a white dot, you will see that it's animated. So now I think I need to put the head ears to hear what I'm doing. And let's connect the result of this LFO to something. For example, most boring but typical idea is to control the filter cutoff frequency. So I click on this blue arrow and change the position relative to the position set in that parameter. And here I was having kind of mental orgasm, because that modulation is not overriding the parameter. It's automatically modulating it, but if I unclick this arrow button, I still can change this parameter by myself. I can change it but by MIDI device, by MIDI controller. I can automate it, so that's connection between parameter and modulator is not exclusive. Like typically if you export something in TouchDesigner to parameter. So it's more like, it's even not like bind. So that's some info for TouchDesigner users. What is cool, that you still can modulate it. So I can choose this random and modulate the same parameter again. Okay, then we can create so much modulators we want. I can, for example, add some segment modulator. Then I can tell to segment to play also every bar. And modulate it additionally. And I even can modulate the other modulator. So for example, if I want, I can use random to modulate the LFO speed. So basically it's super simple, but using that you can create very complex modulations. And if you click with right mouse button on modulated parameter, you can see all modulations you applied and the ranges, and also delete it using the X button. Okay, then you have the remote controls, which are basically some important parameters from your instrument put it in the front. And you can have more of these controls. It's all too much of information for very short lesson we have now, so I will not stop too long on that. But anyway, I will turn back because we also need that on the moment we start with Bitwig. If we would speak now about Ableton, we would obviously finish now about telling about the structure, yeah, about the structure of this data. But in Bitwig, MIDI node is not the final point, or not a first point, because it has also some generative possibilities before, which are called operators. And that means you can use this node and you can change the data this node is outputting. What kind of data is actually sent by the MIDI node? It's not only sending the trigger and the pitch, it's also sending some additional data like velocity, like timbre, expressions, pressure, gain and panorama. Velocity is controlled by this row, by this line with dot, and you can generate random velocities. For example, if I just take the velocity and add the velocity spread, you can see two ranges below and above, and in this range I will get a random velocity every note or every tact. It's also a very big topic. I just want to point your attention on that the structure in Bitwig is more flexible and more complex than in any other DAW. So okay, in Ableton we also have random velocities, but that's all. Next step. Let's speak about the audio samples. And for that we can go to the library and find the samples plus clip button and click on samples, and here we can scroll and see the library of samples. What is cool in Bitwig is also very nice and flexible search system, so you can have the tags, the categories, so I can structure all my database or all my library of samples very well. So let's take some drum loop and I just drop it to the audio track here. Also in Ableton that would be the last unit of data you have. In Bitwig it's not all. Basically the Bitwig audio sample is designed the same way like the like a combination of MIDI note and sampler device, because you have something called audio events. And for example, I can choose the knife tool and split the sample to several parts. That can be done on grid or outside of a grid, that up on me. I can even split it very often if I want, and then if I splitted it, I can select the pointer tool, select all these parts, and they will be acting as MIDI notes actually, because we can same way like in MIDI generate the random parameters for these audio samples. For example, we can randomly change the panorama or pitch. So let's play with pitch a bit. So I opened this spread window using this arrow, and here you can see the histogram and the percentage of randomness. And if I increase the house on some moment, you will see it generating random values. And if I play that now, it starts to play random pitches. So even using that way, you can create much more easily very complex rhythmical structures, because you can modulate not only pitch but also volume, for example, or gain. You can also decide if you want to play some clips, some audio events or not. For example, I can choose that and say, okay, I want to play it only on every even tact. So basically on the end, even on level of the pattern of sound clip, you have a lot of generative probabilities and possibilities. Okay, that's a super basic introduction here. So then we come here, we can see the same idea. We have output from track, which includes audio volume, and we can add some effects here. Same for MIDI track. After the device we can attach some effects. So for example, I can add some distortion. Like a Berlin guy, I think there are never too much of distortion. And let's make something funny, also using modulations. I can, for example, analyze the volume of the drum track and change the distortion parameters. For example, I will just put here the audio sidechain, point the audio sidechain to the output of the audio, choose the low frequency part, change the rise and fall, and use the output arrow to modulate the low frequency. Now I can increase the volume of input, and you can see this blue running dot showing the modulation I have. I can also use, for example, the velocity of the note to change something, some other parameter. And I can use, for example, ADSR to modulate the noise as well. Okay, that was a super short introduction to the logic of working with Bitwig. I think in order to explain it completely well, we need several weeks maybe, but the logic speaks for itself, and it's quite easy. Okay, let's turn to my structure of stream. So I think we should continue to the next topic, and I also really want to ask you write some, I don't know, questions, comments you have. So it's this is not a recording, so I'm speaking right now, so you can somehow affect what I'm doing and ask your practical question if you want. And that will bring me also a bit of feeling I'm with people. And now I should make an introduction of TouchDesigner for Bitwig users. The difference is mostly in the level of flexibility. Okay, if I need to show something on the end. So if we go, for example, inside of Polymer, which is modular synthesizer, it's like it has some built-in modulus inside. So we can click on this show expanded device view button, and we will see the structure of this synthesizer. And what is interesting, that all these parts inside of this synthesizer can be replaced. So for example, I can select other filter or other oscillator. So for example, I can choose here the, let's say, sawtooth, and it replacing the module here. And that's actually this node view remind the Bitwig user what is actually TouchDesigner. So basically TouchDesigner is what is under the hood of the polymer synthesizer, or what we call the polygrid. Also, last thing I want to show before we really switch to the to TouchDesigner, that is a killer feature. That, okay, first if I point my mouse button, so it's, I can see always the name of that parameter or value running right now. There is also some information here in the inspector panel, but very cool for learning is the show help button, because if I open the show help, it will open the help, and what is cool, it's interactive. So you can read what does it mean, and you can in the same moment edit. Okay, that's is amazing tool for learning very fast. Logically, we don't diving now to the grid. However, I will show it a bit later, a bit more detailed than now. But let's switch to TouchDesigner. Sorry. Okay, so what is TouchDesigner? TouchDesigner, basically it's a bit complex to define in simple words, but I would tell something. First, TouchDesigner is a 3D program. It's not visible if you start it, but it is. So it was born from Houdini, which was done on the same year like Pure Data, which was a father of Maximus P and VVVV, but went completely different way, and was done for computer graphics and animation. And one of the partners created a company SideFX, which was designing Houdini in late, I don't know precisely, but let's say late 90s. Same time I was jumped in computer graphics, realized that the future is in real time, and someday it will be the powerful graphic cards which will be able to render stuff in real time. And he started to make his own program oriented for wild mix of everything, because you can do compositing, motion graphics, 3D animation, 2D animation, post-processing, but also to solve like logical problems, logical tasks, make user interfaces, create here the instruments, connect to sensors, control the robots, brew coffee if you have the serial interface to the coffee machine, whatever. So basically it's like a mix between the 3D program with node-based approach and media programming environment. So basically the difference for only node-based media programming environment is also huge, because it's not so abstract, it's all oriented for the working with artistic approach. Because in that point TouchDesigner is very cool. You see here what every operator is doing. That is even different to Bitwig, because even if I open that view, I don't see what data is inside. So I have to create a viewer for that. And in TouchDesigner, it's visible. But the logic is still the same. Yeah, it works with operators connected one by one. Every operator is programmatically called is a function or procedure which is processing data. And in comparison to Bitwig, which is only oriented to work with MIDI or sound data, which is more or less simple numerical values. Basically, if we are working with computer sound anyway, sound is discretized, so it's turned to digits. And TouchDesigner is environment where you can work with different kind of data. It's like in Windows. If you open your, doesn't matter, Windows, Mac, all modern operational systems, you can find here the folders. Pictures is preset up to see the pictures. Music is preset up to see the music files. Videos are preset up to see the music, to video files. So, same is more or less in TouchDesigner. So, TouchDesigner has several data types called in TouchDesigner slang context. And that's menu you can or other create dialog, which you can invoke by double click anywhere in network editor or pressing tab. It's separated to several pages, several tabs with different color, which is about of different data type. So top is basically texture operators. Texture is not because we use that for texturing, but because it's called on GPU like a texture memory. So that's most of these operators are processed inside of GPU. That's why TouchDesigner is super fast for video processing. And that's why also maybe so much of TouchDesigner users making mostly video processing with that. Then chops. Basically, chops is channel values. If we look from different point of view, basically it's built-in Bitwig, or like built-in context to process digital data, simple digital data. And almost same like in analog synthesizers, there is basically no big difference between sound and control values. It's just a question of frequency, how often the data change its value. So, for example, if we have audio device in, which will mimic now my voice, it's just discretized with 44,100 samples per second, typical CD quality, and it has 735 samples, which are values needed, amount of values needed to represent that sound fitting in a time slice of current frame. That is important to understand for Bitwig users, that we have frames. So the frames are defined by the frequency of a display. So if we have typical computer display works with 60 frames, so that's why we have 60 frames per second. And in order to have a nice quality of sound, we need to have 735 samples which are fitting in that time. This is a bit tricky question to understand for the people just coming here. And for simple data, we just need one value. For example, if I would create LFO, similar to what we have in Bitwig, it will be just one value, one sample. and if I play, you can see that's this data changing. So basically that's somehow I came to idea which I will develop. It's not developed yet, but basically working with chops need a lot of experience, and depending on the task you're doing, in some cases it's easier to make with chops, but sometimes if you just need a bunch of modulations and you have TD Bitwig, which is connecting TouchDesigner and Bitwig, you can use Bitwig as a fancy, easygoing chop context, just interfacing the results back to TouchDesigner. So we're recording now, yeah, because I have a question if video will be available. Yes, will be available. Just maybe we have something to share with the people who are online only later. And let's continue. So then, in addition to tops and chops, we have sops, which are just most complex context, because the data needed to represent 3D geometry is structured much more complex than data needed to represent pictures or sound or chop data. Then we have materials as a special context, which create shaders for rendering of 3D objects. Then we have dot context, which is textual data, and this context is very important because it can be used for scripting, but also for interfacing with something like OSC, where you need to send the textual commands to other programs, or where you need to interact with web servers. Or for example, you get some data from the API in internet and parse it and convert it into digital data, but in between you need to work with JSON, so that's why we have a JSON here. Or even we need to just list the content of a folder, so we can see the same content of a folder you can see in Windows Explorer. Okay, custom is a custom operators you can create as a plugins, and components is something like instruments in Bitwig which has nested devices, or something like grid device which has inside several nodes, but for external user looks like a complete ready black box with controls. So the components can be 3D objects needed to create a 3D scene, like lights, cameras, geometry, etc., etc. It can be panels which are needed to create a user interface, and it can be constructed out of buttons, lists, sliders, tables, and several other parts, and containers which can contain everything listed above. Then it has other, which is operator which are complicated to sort to some department, and dynamics, which are related to 3D objects which can be dynamically simulated. So that is a super fast introduction, and in order it looks easier for you, so I mean for that people not coming from the TouchDesigner background, it's not that super complex. So basically in like 3 minutes I can create an interactive installation, let's say. Yeah, it will be like showing how easy the learning curve in TouchDesigner is in comparison to something like MaxMSP or VVVV or processing or something else, because it's super visual and super interactive. So for example, if I want, okay, I can even get here other camera which is not on stream, video device in, and let me show that camera. So I can easily select different cameras, and I can, for example, do something just analyzing the picture. So for example, I can create a circle top, which is just a function which can draw the pixels which are inside of the circle, painted as white, and outside is a transparent, that we can change using parameters. And I want to be able to control the radius of the circle by something. So easiest way is, for example, to use something like sound volume. So for example, I want to control the radius of a circle by volume of my voice. In that case, we are coming to the first test of your understanding of logic, because only thing you need to create complex generative system is simple human logic. If I will try to define which of these 735 samples should control that radius parameter, it will be quite complex to explain to TouchDesigner. Should I take a first one, a middle one, some of middle ones, or last one? So basically, in order to control one logical unit, we need the data represented as another one logical unit. And that's mean in order to solve the technical task, in that case, we need to explain this technical task in human language. So for example, how I would express my task on a human language, I would tell I want to control the radius by the volume of the incoming sound. In that case, I need to find a way how to extract the volume data from that data coming from the microphone. And for that, I just use the analyze chop, because I know it, but in case I don't know it, I would search for some operator which can produce volume. And use volume, which is RMS power, and I can use a trail. It's a special visualizer which can show the history of changing of the data in the chop context. And if I'm silent, you can see the value is around 0. If I start to speak, it's go okay. Even if I speak very loud, it go not so much than 0.1. So that's mean I can now is a stage of testing, of understanding the ranges. So if I can see that I want to bring my radius to 0.4, I need to rearrange. So now I have a values changing in between 0 and 0.1, and I want to bring them in the range of values coming from 0 to 0.4. So basically I just use the mathematical function here and just multiply it, for simplicity now, by 4. And the last step, I can export this channel to parameter. So that's mean something like we do with modulators here. If I click here on the arrow below and want to control something, I do this connection between value and parameter. And same in TouchDesigner, I just open the viewer of the node using this viewer active plus button, and it gives me the access to the content. And I select the channel I want, then I select the operator I want to control to, and drag and drop this to radius. And then one menu will automatically come and offer me different choices. What I can do, I can export chop value, I can chop reference. Basically for now it's too much for the new users, but basically both choices will connect one to another. So if I choose the export chop, then I play, and you see that the circle is easily controlled by volume of my voice. then I can process it somehow. So for example, I would smooth the envelope, speaking on the musical slang. So I would put here the leg operator and just change the first field to 0, the output field to 0.2, and now it will be changing a bit more smooth, not so noisy. Okay, that's the complete basics of TouchDesigner. Logically, we also not cover both TouchDesigner and Bitwig in 2 hours lesson, but I wanted to show for Bitwig users that it's not super complicated. So logically, on the end, we might know that TD Bitwig, the integration between Touch and Bitwig, can get something happening in Bitwig as a chops, as a data channels, and then you can export the results to some parameters to change the visuals reacting to what you are doing in Bitwig, or what Bitwig doing itself generatively, or to the sound generated by Bitwig. Whew. More questions? Okay, I think we are already a bit too late because of the technical problem on the start, so I should go a bit faster. So I was doing a short introduction to Bitwig for the Bitwig users. Now we can turn back to the diagram I was drawing for you, and I turn back to Bitwig to show something more. So basically, if you remind, I was telling in the start, we have a project, we have a track, and we have device, and we have a clip. These 4 units, on the inside of clip we have node, yeah. Inside of audio clips we have audio samples, and we have audio coming out, we have MIDI data coming in between. So basically these units are mimicking the structure of the plugin connecting Bitwig to TouchDesigner. So if I go now and open the palette is like library in Bitwig. We can see several subfolders here, and one of subfolders is called TD Bitwig. And here we have the menu of several devices which are mimicking all the structure I was telling before. So if we compare, we have most important device is Bitwig main, which is needed just to physically connect, to build a data flow between Bitwig and TouchDesigner. Now is a good question if we have the controller stop running. Doesn't want to connect. Cool. I had already several problems today with that, but okay, that will not bring too much of problem in order to explain the basic logic. Basic logic is that we create a Bitwig main device. Okay, I have several patch running which is connected, so I can drop that and go here. So we have Bitwig main, we have a bunch of tools which are connecting to every logical unit of Bitwig. So we have Bitwig track, we have Bitwig clip, we have Bitwig device, we have Bitwig project, we have Bitwig track again. It's a bit difference here because Bitwig track is device controlling the basic behavior of the track. So if you can see here that in Bitwig track we have polymer track selected, and then I can use this operator as a remote control. So I can make it active or disable it. I can make it solo. I can mute it. I can control the volume. And it returns what happens actually with this track in Bitwig, including the audio envelope, which is quite useful, and including audio envelope if it's playing. So we can even use Bitwig project for run the Bitwig song to control the Bitwig itself. So I can start a playback here using the play button, and now I can use the Bitwig track to control, to make it solo, for example, and to control the volume. We have a good question in chat that is there a big difference in the implementation of Bitwig compared to Ableton when it comes to TouchDesigner? Basically, the structure and logic of implementation is very similar, but logically it's different. If you just take a look to the structure of data, to the structure of data in Bitwig and Ableton, it's just different programs constructed quite differently. So, for example, Ableton doesn't have something like project remotes. So for that, Ableton doesn't have project remote control in TouchDesigner. So now I disconnected both tracks in Bitwig. It's so nice, we can even change the color of a track in TouchDesigner. So now the track is blue. Okay. There are some things which are logically not really still working, and as soon as I know, it's also some problems are inside of Bitwig API, so not everything is working completely, but there are some workarounds, like just instead of using MIDI Bitwig node, to send the nodes using direct MIDI connection using a virtual MIDI device. It's all a lot of information which I just not manage to show everything right now, because it will be like we will speaking until tomorrow. But maybe it's good question of Claudio. I will speak about that a bit later. But I just wanted to tell that actually I have in mind to make the course about the audiovisual production in Bitwig and TouchDesigner. and I already have a program in mind. It will be something like 3 or even maybe 4 months, and it will be, I think, most interesting course in that direction I've done until now, because it will combine all knowledge and experience from my projects. And also I was doing some years ago a course about the modular scenes Ableton and TouchDesigner together, and now logically with Bitwig, if my new experience happens during last 5 years, I can do it much more interesting. So the topic of the course is not only the technical thing but also the artistical stuff that time. So I want really to make some more artistical explanation and showing different practical cases. So the program is not completely ready yet, so I think everyone who is on stream right now can affect the program somehow by asking a question, or even better sending questions, because I will not manage to remember everything. And okay, we have some question before I go forward. So Claudio asked if we were speaking about the using Bitwig timeline to queue some stuff in TouchDesigner Visual. Not yet. That will be more closer to the end. Then Johnny asked if it's possible to collect master data from Bitwig and feed it to TouchDesigner. So basically, sure, that is what that TD Bitwig is doing, and what is very important to get that now I'm turning back to Bitwig. That Bitwig has so-called remotes and modulators, and what is super important in the 5th version, in the new release of Bitwig, that Bitwig changed a pipeline a lot and provides now the modulators and remotes not only on the device level but also on the track level and on the project level. And I will show you some practical example from the track we were doing already. So for example, I was using the sidechain on my distortion effect. And what if I need this sidechain more often for different parts of my project? If I will create a sidechain in every device, I just do a lot of work, and it also costs some CPU performance. So that's why I can create something which I can use on a track or project based level. So that's, if I cut this device and paste it here, then doesn't matter where I go, I will see this sidechain, and I can use that sidechain for everything which is on hierarchy below. And the same for the remotes. So I can create a new remote page and link only that amount of parameters I want to control in the same moment from different devices. So for example, I will bring some filter to my drum clip. I will add some delay to my drum clip. Then I can, for example, make some modulator for that mix, because I don't want to play it. To change that mix, I just want to enable and disable it. So for that reason, I can create the interface button and use that to modulate my mix. So properly I need to disable that mix completely, then click here and enable it until the level I want. So I want to 100%. And then, for example, I can map these 8 buttons to, let's say I will map it to the filter cutoff, to post distortion, to that button. I can rename it to the enable delay. And then I go back to polymer synthesizer and I want also to make some changes, to make some parameters available in this project remote. So I click on this button and I click on the filter cutoff again. And for example, on the sub oscillator volume. And for example, on the drive. So now I have the remote control for everything I need in my track. And for the to interact with these controls, we can go back to TouchDesigner and find the Bitwig remotes track. And here you always see 8 values. They even named properly here, so you can see the same names like here, osts/sub. So I can control them directly from here. And opposite, so if I turn it here, it will be automatically changing also in TouchDesigner, so it's both way connection. So now I can visualize what I mean, so we can change this cutoff. Okay, somehow also remotes also can return the modulation values, and that's super practical. So you can see that, for example, if I start to play, I think right now it's not really working again. Today I have some bunch of bugs. Something's not really working, but okay, basically it should work. Okay, so let me turn to my program until we start to dive in tomorrow. So basically that was a quite short introduction to the TD Bitwig. The question of Claudio about the usage of automation in DAW to control screenplay or narrative part in TouchDesigner is very good, because in TouchDesigner we have timeline, we have also relative timelines, but the experience needed to easily control them is quite high, and it's missing a bit of usability in sense of user interface. It's not missing completely, but it can be done more flexible, let's say. So that's why the TouchDesigner users always, or long time, were using Ableton to control TouchDesigner screenplay. And in Bitwig, it can be done even more interesting and more easy.